Thank you, everyone. Good afternoon, and thank you for taking the time and energy to be here today. My name is Marston Fries, Senior Advisor Consultant with Invesco, partnering with advisory firms like Baird, and I am so honored to be in the presence of some of the most innovative and forward-thinking minds in the industry. It is my privilege to introduce to you the guests of honor for this panel, entitled Milwaukee, the Resiliency Tech Cluster. Our panelists include Dean Amhaus, who has served as the founding president and CEO of the Water Council since March 2010. Dean's diverse experience encapsulates a wide range of expertise in government relations, branding, fundraising, economic development, and nonprofit management in Washington, D.C. and Madison, Wisconsin. Next up is Professor Jean Hassan-Lapp, who joined the faculty at Marquette University in August of 1989. She's now the Vice President for Research and Innovation and a member of the University Leadership Council. Kathy Henrich is the CEO of the Milwaukee Tech Hub Coalition, a nonprofit organization with over 125 members with the mission of inclusively growing tech in the Milwaukee region to drive long-term regional economic growth and create life-changing opportunities for individuals. She also serves on multiple nonprofit boards, including Startup Coalition, Wisconsin Policy Forum, United Way Tech United, and the National TechNut Organization. Kathy also serves on the board of M3 Insurance and chairs their Cash and Investment Committee. Our final panelist is Tim Tharp, who is an Arts and Sciences Dean's Sustainability Fellow and joined the department in 2015. Tim's specialty is in plasma physics, and within this area, he has studied such diverse topics as fusion power, solar flares, and antimatter. He's also interested in teaching about climate change and is working with others across campus to develop a plan to reduce Marquette's carbon footprint. And today's panel is being moderated by Dan Renoir, Baird's Managing Director of Strategic Initiatives. He's a member of the board of the Milwaukee Tech Hub Coalition and Teach for America Milwaukee, as well as past president of the board of the Milwaukee Public Library Foundation. In addition, Dan is an adjunct professor at Marquette University, Applied Venture Capital, and the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, International Investments. So without further ado, Dan, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay. Well, thank you. How this is going to go, first of all, I'm just going to give you a little more background on myself. So I'm 25 years at Baird. I was an equity research analyst for about a decade, and then I ran our equities trading desk. I've been very involved in the public markets and then taking private companies public. So I tend to see companies later in the world that a lot of you play in. In my strategy role at the firm, I've gotten a lot more involved in the innovation side of the state and of the region. And so as a part of that, I did join the Milwaukee Tech Hub Coalition. Baird is a longtime founding member and a partner of the Water Council. I'm also an advisor on a number of venture capital firms in addition to Baird Venture Partners down in Chicago. So one kind of comment up front is there is a huge amount of capital that you may not see in the public markets, in the private markets, in sustainability, green tech, water, et cetera. So I'm seeing a huge amount of capital that is flowing into the very, very earliest stages from the idea stage through seed and Series A and B. So there is a lot of capital looking for opportunities to invest, and I'm seeing some incredible innovation coming out of the U.S. Innovation economy. So that's the first comment up front. Dean is going to walk through a few slides to give you a little bit of perspective on this NSF grant. So this NSF grant is really all about regional innovation. We've seen this happen every sort of 25 years where there's some big push nationally. There's a very big push nationally to create big tech hubs with big federal investments that can have a pretty profound impact on creating these sort of centers of excellence and really reinvigorate the local and regional economies. So I'm going to have Dean do that, and then we'll slide right into questions for the panel.
Thanks. Thanks very much, Dan. And Christina, thank you for setting up my presentation, by the way. So everything that she said at the outset is what we're trying to address and deal with as well. But just to be able to set the stage on this, if I can go back. Just to set the stage for those of you who are not from the Wisconsin area, I want to sort of put into context is like, what do we have here within our region? And we have a lot of water technology companies, not because we're located next to great, Lake Michigan and the Great Lakes. It really has to do everything about the beer here in Milwaukee. And I'd say that is the honest truth. That is the reason why Milwaukee has a real robust water technology companies, because the breweries and the manufacturers and the tanneries back 100 plus years ago needed companies to process and treat water. It was something that we discovered about 15 years ago and really has become the cluster of water technology companies here in this region. And by far, there's nothing that comes close to it in the United States. And I would put us literally within the top 3 globally, really comparative with other countries like Singapore and Netherlands as well. The other thing that we have as a strength, and again, this is all very organic. This has been around for decades and decades, are energy solution providers. And I should preface is when I talk about water tech, these are solution providers on quality and on quantity. And quantity is both not enough or too much. And we also have a lot of energy solution providers. And these are big brand name companies, you know, from the Generex, the Rockwells, the Johnson Controls. These are companies that have been around here, and they have a huge presence within this region. And when you really put this combination of the two of them together, we have this unique aspect, and it's something we kind of have taken up, and you'll hear a little bit more, is to say, could we do something more with all of this? So the something more sort of dropped into our lap with the National Science Foundation probably almost 18 months ago. They came out with a new program that is an open-ended, regions could select what they wanted to pick in terms of topics. They could also select their geography as well, but they were going to channel a lot of money into this program, and it was coming out of Congress, and going through 2 different programs, one being the National Science Foundation, the other that you may be hearing more and more about. There was an announcement yesterday around the U.S. Economic Development Administration around what they call tech hubs. Largely what the 2 programs have been driven is to be able to foster, as Dan said, innovation to get it off of the coast and to get it into every place else across the entire country, and to really foster these kind of innovation centers with a lot of money. So 2 awards types that they say. Regions could determine they could go after a Type 1 award, which is $1 million over a 2-year period. It is a planning grant. Very, very unusual. You just don't see this typically. It's been starting to happen more and more from the federal government, but actually giving money to a place to conduct planning and to say, okay, you've got something there, now pull it all together as well. And the second award or possibility, and again, a region would say, listen, we're really sophisticated enough, we got our act together, we're going to go for the whole enchilada, which is $160 million. And that's for each of 5 regions. So it's a lot of money over a 10-year period of time. But I would also make the argument $160 million is a drop in the bucket. It doesn't go really far when you start having a lot of good ideas as well. So those are the 2 types of awards. The only ones that have been announced is the Type 1 awards. They are going through right now the first round of the Type 2s. But the first award was Type 1s, and we, along with our partners, were the first recipients and applicants. There were probably 600 initial concepts that were proposed. Probably a little over 200 actual, proposals that went in, and they awarded 44 of them. And Wisconsin got 2 out of the 44, which is really good. And this is a map just showing you the diversity. If you go on the NSF website, you can actually click on these dots, and you can see what the focus is. Again, it is open-ended, the topics. I also would say that every place decided what their region was going to be. Some said it was going to be 1 state, some said 3 states, 6 states. It was all self-determined on this as well. So what we have done is to make a proposal. What we really are looking at is the Wisconsin Resiliency Innovation Engine. So again, everything that Christina said, we were recognizing as a problem across the United States and across the world. Climate change is happening. Things are occurring every single day. It's in the news. Whether it's a water issue in terms of too much, not enough, fire issues, hurricanes, no matter what. Every single day there is something in the news. And it is the top of mind for this administration. It's not just dealing with climate change, but how do you address mitigation? Lo and behold, we may actually have some of the ideas and the solutions here in this region that everybody else needs. And so Kathy and I were sort of some of the initial hatchers of this idea and say, could we become an exporter of technologies, solutions, and thoughts around resiliency that the rest of the world needs as well? So we have proposed a Wisconsin Resiliency Innovation Engine that has actually been modified a little bit through our process already, but also tying together water and energy resiliency. We did not want to go all the way down to looking at a whole community. That's a big, big effort. We just didn't think that we wanted to take that big of a focus. So what we are zeroing in on are looking at utilities, both on the water side and on the energy side, because they are the economic drivers of a community. Those systems break down, you have a complete breakdown of the society as well. The other area was manufacturing, because manufacturing, and Chris talked about this earlier, they are employing people, they may be producing the food that people need as well. And as I was talking over lunch as well, it's a double tragedy when an event happens and somebody loses their home and loses their job because of this occurrence. So those are the areas that we wanted to focus on, utilities as well as manufacturers. We also decided that this was going to be our geographic region. So it is the eastern part of Wisconsin. That is where the highest concentration of these water and energy solution companies, as well as into northern Illinois. That's not to say that we're not including the rest of the part of Wisconsin or other areas. It's just to say that's where the highest concentration is. It is also the highest concentration of the universities that are the solution providers and coming up with the new ideas. So extending to Madison, Milwaukee, into Chicago area, and on up into Green Bay as well. This is the lead partners. The Water Council is the principal, but these are the organizations that are doing the heavy lifting. There are many other organizations that are involved, but these are the grunts who are having to do all of the work behind this over the next 2 years. And so the Milwaukee Tech Hub, you'll hear about this. They're leading all of our workforce piece. Jean on the university side, she is the point person for not just Marquette, but all of the universities. When we start getting into what we talk about use-inspired research, Wisconsin Technology Council working on investors to be able to get them working, as well as policy issues at the state and federal level. But these are a list of also, okay, we don't have the other partners, but again, what we're looking to as far as our focus is around these energy and water solutions, use-inspired research. I'm going to spend just a fraction of a second, because Jean, I don't want to steal her thunder all, but it's a very, very different program. NSF typically funds fundamental basic research. This program is completely opposite of that. It's what they call use-inspired research, and Jean will talk about that. Resiliency and workforce, very, very different for NSF. They're talking about workforce, diversity, and that's one of the things that everybody has to be working on. So, in conclusion, we've been doing road shows across the region. We just finished up last week down in Rosemont, Illinois. But one of the things that we keep on hearing, is like, what is our goal after the whole process? And to say literally, where are we going to be in 2035? And I don't think it's a stretch at all to say that this can be the place to have a national center of excellence around water and energy, sustainability and resiliency that the rest of the entire country and the rest of the world need from us. So that gives you a sort of a context of everything.
Which said slightly differently, if you're going to start and form a great company in one of those industries, you would do it here, right? So I'm going to back up just a touch if I can to this. So Kathy Henry, by the way, the order of the intros, this is Kathy right here, and this is Jeannie over here. Being on the board of the Milwaukee Tech Hub Coalition, so it's 150 or 160 companies. So think, everything from Rockwell and Northwestern Mutual, Molson Coors, Baird. There's a number of companies, and then some universities, including University of Wisconsin and Marquette, and the Milwaukee Tech Hub Coalition. So really about the innovation economy. So I sit on the board, sit on the executive committee, and Kathy came to our group and said, hey, I think the Milwaukee Tech Hub should get behind submitting a proposal to the NSF. And we thought, quite honestly, that she was crazy. And I personally thought that she was doubly crazy because we have all these other things we're working on, and why would we waste our time on a government grant? And I was wrong, so I'm going to be the first one to say that. So as Dean Amhouse said, 660 companies submitted, 44 were awarded. So one of the things I'd like for you, Kathy, to do is to talk a little bit about two things. One, talk about the assets that you saw in the region as you've gotten to know the NSF and the sort of federal grant process, and you've become a bit of an expert in that. But if you could talk a bit about what you saw in the region that you thought made us a good candidate to possibly have a chance to win this award, and then also talk about some of the workforce angle that the NSF is valuing here as a part of this process.
Thanks a lot. So as you might have guessed, I listen, but I also revolt at times, and I just spend my weekends doing it. So I am a big believer in these federal grants because it's once in a generational type of money that is coming into a region. And when we first started talking about this, the first thing is when you saw those numbers of companies that you saw up there around water and energy, that put us into a category. Like, we have concentration here. We just don't talk about it very much that way. And so that was an asset that immediately stood out, is just our concentration of companies. And because of that, we actually have some concentration of talent. We have one of the highest concentrations of electrical engineers, for example, per capita. And engineering in general is very high per capita. So we have essentially a ready workforce to be working on these energy and water. We also have what I would consider a near-ready workforce as well to be able to handle the growth. And what I mean by that, we actually, believe it or not, have the 6th highest concentration of students per capita here in Milwaukee. And so that provides a pool of early talent for us to continue to accelerate an engine like this and give us the talent to do that. And they're being trained in programs here in the region that have concentration and capabilities here, right, around energy, around water, et cetera. So all of those give us kind of the talent piece of it to go along with the industries. But we also have the test bed. So Dean talked about the use-inspired research. We actually have the 2nd highest concentration of manufacturing per capita. So when we started talking about, like, we don't want to go this big, right? Because if we do, we'll lose. We can't be everything to everybody. But if we focus on manufacturing, it gives us an ideal test bed. So what's really exciting about this is it says we're going to build on the strengths we have here in the region, and I just kind of went through them, build to a huge market opportunity of the future, and through that, hopefully gain and by the way, in an area that should be important to all of us and is attracting a lot of investment, it's a recipe for success.
Excellent. Okay, so Jeannie, Dean talked about use-inspired research. You're going to educate us all on what the difference is between what the NSF has historically funded, and then what do they mean by use-inspired research, and how does that manifest itself in this process?
Thank you. NSF started as an agency that was designed to promote discovery and to really support some of the most fundamental basic science that we do. And for example, I am a chemist whose work as a laser scientist was supported by NSF at the start of my career for things that had no obvious application. and my colleagues over here are laughing at me, but it's true. I blew molecules apart and watched how the pieces moved. to understand how energy got transferred within a molecule after it got blasted by a laser. So that's really fundamental work. That is the seed of innovation and continues to be part of NSF's mission. But over the years, the National Science Foundation has also understood that we need to go beyond just the good, strong, basic science and start to think about what are the broader impacts of that work. So that was a step to get all of us starting to think about not just what do we do on a daily basis, but how might it be used in the future. And workforce development, access to equity and opportunities for training students all became an important part of NSF's mission as well. So the agency took a step forward in thinking about moving toward use-inspired research by starting industry university collaborative research centers. And we have two that are coordinating with this effort, one that looks at energy-related issues that the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee is part of the lead on, another one that is a water-related center that both UWM and Marquette are part of. And that brings together groups of corporate sponsors who start to steer the research efforts in terms of things that they are interested in, but at a pre-competitive level. So it's not to the point where you're trying to solve a problem for a particular company, but doing research that is of interest to the groups of companies for a longer term possible implementation. And this was a really important step because what it did is it enabled us to figure out where the barriers to doing this kind of work are, both in terms of the interactions between companies and universities, in terms of getting university faculty and students to refocus their efforts to things that are a little more along the D side of R&D. But now we're starting to move to what does it take to start to really take the entire ecosystem, all of the expertise at the universities, in small startups, in mid-sized companies, and apply it to solving specific problems that are of use to, it might be a broad sector, it may be to individual companies, but to really have the users themselves define the problems that need to be approached. And I'll just say as a side note that this is not just NSF's approach now. The National Institutes of Health is taking a very translational focus now on their work to figure out what are the unmet health needs of a community and to drive research and create the partnerships which go well beyond the universities to solve those problems.
Okay, so the gentleman on the far end, Tim, I was going to ask him a question next, but I'm actually not going to do that. You guys are going to be like, he's like the Wizard of Oz. We're going to be 25 minutes into this, you're going to say, who is that guy? What does he have to add? So I'm going to come back to Tim. So one of the big aspects to this NSF grant is the concept of collaboration. And I've not been around a lot of federal grants in my life. That was a little bit of my reaction. I'm like, I sort of believe in, sort of privately funded innovation and capital markets and investments, et cetera, on the private side. So the public side I'm a little bit newer to. And what Jeannie, what you said does not surprise me at all. Like that's how I think of government funded research, like for what purpose, for another 15 years of grants. And my brother's a professor, by the way, so he lives in the world of grants. So I kind of get that. But anyways, I've been impressed with some of the ideas that they brought forward, particularly collaboration. And it's not easy to pull off collaboration. So I had the slide you put up there, Dean, that showed Water Council and the universities, et cetera. Let me start with Jeannie, and then I'll work my way back. Can you talk about collaboration at the university level, and then a little bit of the university tied back into the sort of some of the partners around the table, Rockwell, et cetera?
Yeah, so, as we look at collaboration opportunities and partnership opportunities around the research space, you look for people who share a mission and a goal. You look for partners that will, bring something to the table that we can also bring to the table. And I think the universities all understand that We have a broad swath of expertise. The University of Wisconsin at Madison certainly has many, many research strengths, but there's complementary strengths at UW-Milwaukee, at a smaller place like Marquette. And none of us alone could accomplish what we can do together. So there's collaboration across the universities, but also to start to think about what those partnerships look like with companies, with other organizations in the community that allow us to all do something that we couldn't do by ourselves. And that's really the key thing. Takes a lot of time, takes a lot of effort to wrangle, and we are very grateful to Dean to continue to pull all of us together to kind of hash through these things. I learn something new every day when we are on our meetings together.
Kathy?
Yeah, I would say, first of all, collaboration is work, right? Anybody that is in an organization that has partnership organizations, right, realize that that's a dedicated kind of function. But what's really impressive, I think, in a community is there is no specific, we are the leader, right, in a region. It's all a collaborative issue or collaboration based on our relative strengths. And what I found wonderful about this group is a recognition of the strengths of each of the groups, but secondly, putting what I always call the community first hat on first, and really worried about how do we drive the region forward, and then we worry about our individual organizations. And it takes that in order for us to all be successful together. But with that said, we know that it isn't just the parties on the grant that are going to be important to this. There are many, all of you in the community that are going to be critical to this as well. And there's all different kinds of ways. So I didn't answer the workforce question earlier, I'm sorry. So we are responsible for the workforce component of it. We happen to be certified in what's called talent pipeline management from the U.S. Commerce, which is an approach to regional workforce planning based on data and based on employer input. So basically collecting and predicting the workforce requirements going forward into the future, then looking at the assets that we have here in the region, the programs, and figuring out all of where those gaps are going to be within the approach of filling those gaps. Well, you cannot fill a workforce gap without collaboration with employers, right? At the end of the day, if we are not connecting to a job, we can educate all we want, but at the end of the day, what matters is the job. And so all of you as employers, also serve as collaborators to help us form these programs to fill the gaps, and then to pilot them with us, and then to scale with us. And that's going to be a critical role of employers going forward. So that's just one example of how all of you can help. But it is critical that we have the community on board.
So collaboration is just critical to all of this. We do not at the Water Council do workforce at all. Thank God, Kathy is like carrying that load. We do not do research. That's what the universities do. When we were looking at this whole program, NSF is looking for big, audacious ideas. So you've got to be big and bold, and we were looking initially and saying, should we just focus on water? And we didn't think that was big and bold enough. So we added in energy. We don't do energy, necessarily. So we got to bring in our energy partners. We need investor partners. So all of these partners, and we're actually still looking for additional partners. One, as an example, we are very weak on tribal engagement. We're trying to go out and how do we engage, with the tribal community, because that's really important. We found some things yesterday around persons who are in prisons, in terms of job programs, and we got some ideas on that as well. So all of this is based around this collaboration. And it's been very, very interesting is also, universities are unto themselves lots of different layers and layers and layers. And there's Marquette, and Jean can, smile at that. Madison, oh my Lord. If you want to talk about bureaucracies out there, There are fiefdoms from water and energy and engineering and on and on and on. The great thing is that they all want to be a part of it and be a part of this engine. And fortunately, we've got the chancellor's office involved, and so we've got a person who's literally bringing all of those resources together. And what we are doing is we're crossing that divide between the Madison-Milwaukee, big wall. We are literally walking and driving and zooming and teaming across on a regular basis. And so we've come to learn that we can and we need each other to be able to be successful. And it extends up to Green Bay, because Green Bay, as an example, they've got a lot of things that we need to tap into that really will help us, as well as crossing the border into northern Illinois. And yes, we're going to start to include them, in this engagement, because we really look at this as we're not just competing, here locally. We really are competing on a global scale, and we cannot do it alone. And frankly, we need your help and involvement in this to become successful, because you're the investors in this whole mechanism that we're trying to grow. We don't have enough dollars to be able to do all the things that we're wanting to do. We hopefully will find the companies and the solutions you want to invest in and to be participate in that, but we need your help in this whole thing too.
Yeah, one of the, so I mentioned Baird's been involved in the Water Council for a long time, and so for those of you not familiar, it is a global organization based here in Milwaukee, and all of the biggest water players in the world, so Zurn, A.O. Smith, Evaqua, I mean, you name it. And one of the things that we've been impressed with, and I've been very impressed with as it relates to this grant, is how the corporates work together, literally down the engineering teams that work on real water problems through the Water Council. So that gave us a bit more confidence that it was possible to get all these siloed organizations from universities to corporates in the region to work together. So in a pretty short period of time, it's been pretty impressive what you all have been able to accomplish thus far. So with that, I'm going to now have the Wizard of Oz at the table speak. So in terms of bringing all of this together a little bit, Tim has I think an awesome example of sort of real practical application of what we're even talking about. A use case, there's maybe a little less research involved, but there's definitely, you can see the public, the private, and Tim, I don't know, do you want to go through slides? Do you want to just talk about what you're doing?
I'll just talk this
Okay,
way, yeah.
So Tim, the floor is yours. Bring a little of this to life.
All right, so I'm not related to this grant, but I'm working on a project.
Not yet.
Not yet. Not yet, yeah.
You are being recruited
So
into
not
this.
All right, but I'm working on a project together with David Nowacek, who's in the back. He's my partner in this endeavor. And it's a project that involves both water and energy. And I'm personally transitioning myself away from useless inspired research towards something a little more practical. And so the project that we're looking at is a project that started in the classroom and has developed. And the idea is to think about converting our campus from steam-powered heat and chiller-based water systems to a geothermal system. Okay, but a lot of campuses are doing this, and so that's not particularly unique. Geothermal systems are a very well-established technology where you extract some thermal energy from the 50-degree ground below us and use it to heat and cool buildings in a very, very energy-efficient way, in a way that could be carbon neutral if you use electricity that's generated appropriately. But the kind of unique thing that we're doing here is thinking about this not as just a campus conversion, but thinking about this as a bigger picture that involves our utility company. So rather than cutting ourselves off of We Energies and building a system that just saves the university money, we're asking the question, okay, well, what if We Energies were involved and actually managed the geothermal wells and provided that water to us as a utility service? And if we were able to do this and show that the university could save a lot of money, that we could reduce our carbon emissions by a great deal, that this was a good business strategy for an energy company, and that we could work out all of the relevant regulation to make this possible for the utility company to expand into other areas and markets, then what we're doing is looking for a way to pave the way to essentially replace what is fundamentally a fossil-fueled activity, that's heating of our homes, with a technology that is not fossil fuel dependent, and we could do this in a similar way. So, I have a few things I want to make sure I mention here. So why are we looking at this in particular? If you look at Marquette's emissions, most of our emissions today come from electricity that we use. But we all know that the grid is greening, and as the grid greens, that contribution of our emissions is going down, right? And so if we were to do nothing, then someday in the future, perhaps 2030, if we meet the published targets of the utility company, our emissions would be reduced by half just by doing nothing, just by waiting for the electric grid to become greener. But at that date, then, the majority of our emissions would be coming from our heat, our steam system, which is essentially the same as burning natural gas, right? It's just that our natural gas is burned at a power plant and distributed by steam versus piping the natural gas directly into the buildings. And right now, there's not a real roadmap for utility companies for how to exit that part of their business, right? How do you get away from using natural gas to heat homes in a place like Wisconsin? And this is the development of a roadmap to transition companies from natural gas to something that could be carbon neutral. And the really cool thing about this, we're following a playbook that we've seen before. In Massachusetts, there's an organization called HEAT, H-E-E-T, that has been helpful in us developing this vision for here. It would be the first time we do anything like this in Wisconsin, but in Massachusetts, utility companies are already starting to look into this because they have laws that say you must not sell natural gas after a certain date. And so these companies are saying, okay, well, what are we going to do? And what they've discovered is that they can use the same trucks, the same labor force, the same pipes, the same drills to build out a geothermal heating and cooling system to replace the natural gas pipeline. And so this is a very exciting thing because from many, many perspectives, it seems like a really big win-win situation. And yeah, so for Marquette, what kind of investment are we looking at here? It's a big investment. We're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars to convert our campus to geothermal, but a large chunk of that amount of money is going to be money that would have had to be spent anyway. We already maintain our systems. We already have to replace failing components. And so it's just an idea to redirect capital that's already being invested or has to be invested towards something that can be in principle carbon neutral. Yeah.
Can you also talk about, just along these lines, with Marquette being based in the city, I think part of what you were at least theoretically talking about is that this could potentially be used more broadly in the neighborhoods,
right.
even initially.
So being in the city, there's two factors here. One, a lot of people look at us and say, it's too dense, you can't do geothermal here. Well, we can't put geothermal under this building very cost effectively because the building's already here, right? But if you involve the utility company, they can go out and reach other areas like the middle of the street where they already have the right of way to build things. And then the whole idea is that Marquette could become the first block of a larger system, and the utility company could then add on the next customer, the next customer, the next customer. And my dream is that, we start this here, and 5 years from now, they come knock on my door up in the Whitefish Bay suburb and say, we're here to hook up your geothermal, right? So that's the ultimate goal.
Well, and what's kind of cool about that, I mean, first of all, the fact that the city is powered by steam is somewhat interesting, but whether it's steam or natural gas, the partnership with the utility is what's been lacking. So Baird is headquartered downtown. If Baird decided, hey, we'd like to save money, we'd like to be more sustainable, we want to put in a geothermal system, we would have no ability to do that. Even though Baird is a relatively large company in Milwaukee, we would have no ability to do that because we don't have rights of way around, we wouldn't be able to pull it off. So the partnership, Marquette leading this, in this case, this thought process kind of coming out of your classroom into a plan, in with the utilities, and now actually having We Energies partnering up with you, so it's certainly exciting. I don't know, Kathy or Jeannie, if you have any comments on this, or we can move on.
I would just say, I'll give a little plug for Marquette's mission. So as a Catholic and Jesuit university, we're driven by the greater good. And one of the key things in the Jesuit tradition right now is to understand how we care for our common home. And that is the world around us. And so what's really exciting is to see on campus faculty like Tim and David and others who are taking up these opportunities to really push us to look straight at the challenges and try and come up with creative solutions.
That's helpful.
Go ahead. I think this is one of, as Tim said, it really is a actual practical example of putting things to work, and it's on a large scale. So this is, sort of a great example of resiliency and sustainability for the university, for the community. It doesn't have to be big scale either. I want to just give you a quick little story in terms of somebody I talked to a few years ago, small town in Baldwin, Wisconsin, near Minneapolis, plastic extrusion company working in the medical industry. He was expanding out his operation, building out a new facility, brought in some new equipment into the facility. And with that, he went from using 900 gallons of water a day to 19. And I said, did you say 19? He goes, yeah. He didn't make a big deal. I go, you're 900 to 19. And he goes, yeah, we saved a lot on our water bill, but our energy bill plummeted. Because what he was having to do before was he was having to store and having to heat that water 24/7. And so by simply bringing in some new equipment, he was using the water, heating the water, point of use, point of time. That motivated him to say, I wonder if I put solar panels on my roof, if I could get some more, savings off of that. That's the kind of thing that is really transformational. And if you can start having that happen across the board, again, small businesses to large universities, you can have an impact so that we are more sustainable and more resilient.
Okay, so if we look at where we are in the grant process, and we look at the sort of some of the big pieces, collaboration, et cetera. So maybe I'll direct this initially to you, Kathy, and then you can maybe hand it over to Dean. So how do you handicap this? Okay, so I'm an equity research analyst. I need to do this. So how do you handicap the odds of winning the big grant? A little bit of what's the timing look like? And then maybe most importantly, what are the things that we as a region or a community could do to be helpful to improve the odds of a successful grant award?
Yeah, so I think first of all, we're all trying to move at speed to do the initial strategy component, right? So, it is like any other strategy, your strengths and your gaps and all of the data, et cetera. So being able to get that portion of it done so that we can start to think about also in that time frame, pilots. That will be helpful to us. Like the more we can de-risk a proposal, like I said, goes to the federal government, the better. So that's an opportunity for engagement as well, whether that be pilots around workforce, pilots around use-inspired research, et cetera. All we really are looking for are opportunities for us to be able to then replicate and create, systems that allow us to scale, because that de-risks it when we go forward. I think the other thing that I would think about is also we tend to be, I'll say, a little bit humble about our investments we are making as a region. There's a lot more going on than we often even talk about. I came from an East Coast company. They talked about everything, right? And boldly, even before it was real. And we do things very quietly. And so, and I'll call out Tim, who's in the background, Tim Tesh is out there. One of the things that these big federal grants require is matching dollars. And initially, that sounds pretty daunting. because, it's $160 million. That's a big nut to crack until you realize how others are doing it. And when you get under it, they're basically counting investments that they would have made anyway in related infrastructure or innovation centers, et cetera. So part of us, kind of being a collective here to go win that accelerant and those kinds of grants is for us to be aware and to be able to look at how do we plug some of the investments that might be going on anyway for your organizations and think about what we might be able to do. It also can be things like, we're going to do ESG investing, and we want to be investing in startups that are solving these types of challenges. That all counts as matching, believe it or not. So we just have to think creatively as we think about how do we come up with the match. But that is going to be a big portion as well as we go forward, that we can show the investment of the region, not just of the federal government into this.
It's going to be tough. It's going to be really, really hard because there's such stiff competition. But we've already made it through the first round. NSF is saying there is something real tangible here. So we've got a unique position as well. The other thing that I think is playing to our favor is that out of those 44 applicants or recipients, I would put 75% of them are universities driven. And it's interesting is that we're actually going to NSF or training school right now. So way different thing that I've ever done with a federal program. We're actually going every 2 weeks virtually, 3 hours for a class with MIT professors, 3 semesters of this training going on. The first 3 sessions have been about how to engage stakeholders. And we're going, what? We already do this. Because that's the way we live and work all the time. We have to, go back on collaboration and stakeholders as well. So I think that the fact that we are driven by industry and engagement, which is very different for NSF, they were looking for those kind of things. That helps us. The other thing that I think helps us, and it goes back to what Christina said earlier, is the topic that we're covering. This is a really pressing issue when it comes to water and energy, and we're the only ones out of the 44 that are focusing on that topic. So we think this is a topic that is, unfortunately, a very pressing issue that needs solutions. So, our odds are still going to be, tough, but I think we can make a strong case with all of those different elements.
And just to add one thing, there are things we can do, and you've just heard about the building out of the partnerships, getting more folks engaged in the ecosystem that we are trying to build and support so that we go in with a really strong proposal. What we can't control is what NSF does between now and I think the end of the year in who they award the first set of the Type 2 awards to. And so we're also, in the course of our planning, need to be adaptable, need to be able to respond looking at which regions get funded, because that will be a piece. You can imagine that in Washington, D.C. these days, there's plenty of attention on who's getting money into their region and who's not. And also topically, if that becomes an issue, it may not. But really, we have to build the engine as we're going along. And the last thing I will say is I have never been involved in an NSF proposal where we knew so little about what they were really looking for going into the process because they didn't know. They were really building this opportunity as they were announcing it and asking for the first set. Guidelines continue to evolve. And so, again, the ability to be adaptable and to roll with the changes around us will be really important.
So one of the things that we talked about at the board of the Tech Hub and with the Water Council is just the importance of this effort. You know, as much as I want to say, if you don't win it, you know, you win, you lose. But I think in this case, the process is important for the region. And so I think what you guys are doing is great, and all of your partners and getting the public, private side and the university side collaborating is going to have huge benefits down the road for the region, whether or not this grant is awarded. So one of my quick follow-up questions, and I want to leave a little bit of time for Q&A, is, Kathy, you mentioned pilots, and Dean, you mentioned smaller scale, and Gene, just maybe you could tangibly talk about like what you're, like more specifically what kinds of examples might be germane to the audience here. And then relatedly, if there's an ask of the audience, specific ask, a call to action that they could do either back to their companies, or is there like an awareness thing? Would you be asking for letters of support from the community in the next 6 months, or like what maybe those two things to wrap up, and then we'll see if there's any questions.
Yeah, I'll start with maybe the workforce side of it. So as we go through this planning piece of it, if you want to be involved and you have, workforce planning that you're doing for your organization in this area, especially around energy and water, let us know. We're going to be looking for partners who can help us in that component of it. If there are programs that you're aware of that we need to make sure we're aware of, that's certainly one. But it's also in the piloting in your own organization. So, for example, apprenticeships is a really well-known way of doing things in the trades. It's not as prevalent in technology. It's certainly an opportunity. Early talent adoption and relooking at your jobs to absorb more of the early talent that's coming out of our universities is another. So those kinds of things we're happy to help with as a forming of a partnership as we go into this bigger opportunity area. But then there's other areas, and I'll leave it for Jean to talk about, like research, because there's opportunities there as well. So every one of us have places where you can start to plug in.
Yep. If you have an energy or water-related topic that is an issue for you or a challenge, we'd love to hear about it. So we could start to think about what kind of team needs to be built to start to address that use-inspired example and start the ball rolling on a couple of these to show not just how we will do it, but that we are able to do it.
Yeah, I just double down on that. We're done with our public sort of road shows, and we're now getting into this point. One thing we didn't include also is that obviously we're working with manufacturers, people who are looking for solutions. So we're working with our state's manufacturing extension partnership, so we're literally going out to manufacturers. We also know that Wisconsin is not a place where a lot of climate issues are happening at all. So we're not necessarily looking for going back out to, companies in Wisconsin, manufacturers, and saying, what's your water and energy issues? They're not as much. But maybe do you have operations in some other parts of the country, other parts of the world that you are running into, challenges, or your supply chain? So we're trying to find these companies, and if you're willing to become a partner and participate in this, can we pilot some of the research that's coming out of the universities in your operations so we can test this all out? And we need to test out a few different items to make the case that we're going to go forward with this as well. So interesting enough is we are not looking for letters of support, because NSF has been adamant, they do not want that. They want partners. So if you're going to come to be engaged, you are going to be engaged, and we need that engagement as well, a seriousness. Manpower has just come on as one of our partners, and they said, we'll provide a letter of support. We said, no, that's not good enough. We need your data. And they said, okay, they're in, because they understand the whole green workforce as well. So we're open to any industry and business, but again, there are a lot of investors and people talk to investors. We really want to talk to you a lot over the next 18 months.
I don't know, do you have time for a question or two? sitting between, yes.
Thank you so much for the really interesting panel. I had one question. When do you start focusing or thinking about the economics? You made the great example of 900 gallons of water going to 19 and the importance around the economics of lowering the energy bill. When do you start to think about the innovation being coupled with, does this make financial sense and does the economics work?
So that's actually been happening in some respects. You know, we've been, as the Water Council, we've been doing that. There's been some things on the energy side. We actually have right now is a graduate student that's coming to us who is a data scientist. She's in a master's program as well. So she's going out and doing the analysis of all the water companies. Then the next thing is the energy companies. And so we're trying to get a better sense of the lay of the land of the industry. But then that's also, I mean, that's not just big companies, it's going down to small companies as well. You know, to looking at the economic values and the benefits of things, you know, going forward, and this is, you know, sort of talked about on some of the earlier sessions, you know, we are focusing more about, less about reporting, but addressing risks. And if you can really go at this is, how do we reduce risks both on the energy and water side? That should get people's attention and a cost factor as well, and a benefit. Wow, we impressed, we got you all, everything. Wow.
Okay. All right. Thanks, guys.